It was once described as the war that would end all wars. Tragically, it did nothing of the sort. World War I became one of the deadliest conflicts humanity had ever witnessed. It reshaped borders, destroyed empires, and left millions dead. For the first time in history, countries from nearly every corner of the globe were pulled into a single, interconnected war. But how did it begin? How did a regional dispute spiral into a global catastrophe? The story starts with a single assassination. But it certainly doesn't end there. Behind that violent act was a tangled web of alliances, ambition, fear, nationalism, and political miscalculation. Blame cannot be placed neatly on one individual or one nation. Responsibility was shared. And perhaps the most haunting question of all: could it have been prevented? Let's break down the forces that ignited the Great War, examine the motives of the major powers, and explore how the decisions of a few leaders changed the course of history. World War I lasted from 1914 to 1918. It involved nations across Europe, Russia, the United States, the Middle East, and beyond. The two primary coalitions were known as the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. The Central Powers included Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. Italy was originally aligned with them but later switched sides. Opposing them were the Allies: France, Great Britain, Russia, Serbia, Belgium, Japan, and eventually the United States, among others. But before these massive alliances clashed, the crisis began in the Balkans. The spark was lit in June 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, heir to the imperial throne, was visiting Sarajevo in Bosnia. On June 28, he and his wife, Sophie, were shot and killed by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist with ties to a secret group known as the Black Hand. This assassination shocked Europe. But should the murder of one royal figure have led to a global war? Almost certainly not. The killing was the trigger. But the explosive material had been building for years. Serbia had recently emerged from the Balkan Wars and was fueled by intense nationalism. Many Serbs dreamed of uniting all Slavic peoples in the region under one nation. That ambition threatened Austria-Hungary, a multi-ethnic empire already struggling to hold together its diverse population. To Vienna, Serbia represented a dangerous source of rebellion and instability. With Germany's support, Austria-Hungary saw an opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism once and for all. Germany's leader at the time, Kaiser Wilhelm II, played a critical role. He envisioned Germany as the dominant power in Europe, economically, militarily, and politically. He resented Britain's naval superiority and feared Russia's growing strength. When Austria-Hungary considered punishing Serbia, Germany gave what historians call the blank check. This meant Berlin promised full support. Financially and militarily, no matter the consequences. This assurance dramatically escalated the crisis. Austria-Hungary issued Serbia an ultimatum filled with harsh demands. Among them was the requirement that Austrian officials participate directly in Serbia's internal investigation of the assassination. Accepting such terms would have severely compromised Serbian sovereignty. The deadline was only 48 hours. Serbia agreed to most of the demands, but not all. For Austria-Hungary, partial compliance was not enough. War was declared. Now the alliance system began to activate like a row of falling dominoes. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic nations, mobilized in support of Serbia. But Russia's motivations were not purely altruistic. Expanding influence in the Balkans and gaining access to warm water ports had long been Russian strategic goals. France, Russia's ally, backed Russian mobilization. France had never fully recovered from its humiliating defeat in the Franco-Prussian War decades earlier. The loss of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany still burned deeply in the national consciousness. Some French leaders believed that if Germany were tied down fighting Russia in the east, France might regain lost territory in the west. Germany responded to Russian mobilization by declaring war. But German military planning required swift action. The Schlieffen Plan called for a rapid strike against France before turning eastward to confront Russia. To do this, Germany invaded Belgium, a neutral country. This single decision changed everything. Great Britain had guaranteed Belgian neutrality. When German troops crossed the Belgian border, Britain declared war. But British motivations went beyond simply honoring treaties. Germany had been building a powerful navy, challenging British dominance at sea. The rapid growth of German industry also threatened Britain's economic leadership. Many British policymakers viewed Germany as a rising rival that needed to be contained. A continental war that weakened Germany might preserve Britain's global supremacy. So by early August 1914, what began as a regional conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia had escalated into a European war involving all the great powers. Soon, their colonies and allies around the world were drawn in as well. Was Germany primarily responsible? Many historians argue yes. Germany had the power to restrain Austria-Hungary but chose instead to encourage aggression. German leaders understood that Russian involvement was likely, yet they proceeded anyway. Some believed Germany saw war as inevitable, and perhaps even desirable. Industrial competition, imperial ambitions, and military pride created a climate where conflict seemed like an opportunity rather than a disaster. Kaiser Wilhelm II believed Germany had reached its peak strength. Waiting too long might allow rivals to catch up. If war was coming eventually, better to fight now. But Germany was not alone in miscalculating. Russia mobilized rapidly, which Germany interpreted as an act of war. France offered strong diplomatic and military backing to Russia. Britain failed to clearly signal how it would respond early in the crisis, leaving Germany uncertain about British involvement. Austria-Hungary deliberately designed its ultimatum to Serbia in a way that made rejection likely. It sought territorial expansion and a demonstration of imperial strength. Nationalism intensified public support for confrontation in nearly every country. Newspapers inflamed tensions. Politicians feared appearing weak. Military timetables also played a role. Once mobilization orders were issued, they were difficult to reverse. The machinery of war, once set in motion, moved faster than diplomacy. Another important factor was militarism. In the early 20th century, European nations glorified military power. Massive armies were maintained in peacetime. Naval arms races intensified competition, especially between Britain and Germany. War was not universally feared. In fact, many leaders believed it would be short and decisive. They were terribly wrong. Instead of a quick victory, the war turned into a brutal stalemate. Trenches stretched across Europe. Machine guns, poison gas, and artillery caused unimaginable destruction. Entire generations of young men were lost. And by 1917, the United States entered the conflict after German submarine warfare targeted American ships and the infamous Zimmermann telegram proposed a German-Mexican alliance. The war became truly global. By the time the fighting ended in 1918, four empires had collapsed: the German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian empires. Millions were dead. Europe was shattered economically and politically. The Treaty of Versailles placed heavy blame and harsh penalties on Germany, planting seeds of resentment that would later contribute to World War II. So, could World War I have been avoided? Most historians agree that it was not inevitable. If Austria-Hungary had accepted Serbia's partial compliance, if Germany had withheld unconditional support, if Russia had delayed mobilization, if Britain had engaged more forcefully in mediation, the crisis might have been contained. Instead, leaders prioritized power, prestige, and alliance obligations over compromise. Fear of losing status outweighed the fear of war. In the end, World War I was not caused by a single bullet in Sarajevo. It was caused by years of rivalry, unchecked nationalism, imperial ambition, military planning, and political arrogance. The assassination was merely the spark. The powder keg had already been built. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is that many decision-makers believed they were acting rationally, defending their nation's interests. But collectively, their choices led to devastation on a scale the world had never seen. History reminds us that global conflicts rarely begin with one simple cause. They grow from tension, mistrust, pride, and the failure of diplomacy. The Great War stands as a warning. When leaders see war as useful. When alliances override dialogue. When nationalism drowns out reason. The consequences can reshape the world. And as history would prove just 2 decades later, the lessons of World War I were not fully learned.